regarding bills number 190152, 190153, 190154, and resolution number 190164. Will the clerk please read the titles of the bills and resolution?
Bill number 190152, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2020-2025 inclusive. Bill number 190153, an ordinance to adopt a fiscal 2020 capital budget. Bill number 190154, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2020. In resolution 190164, resolution providing for the approval by the Council of the City of Philadelphia of a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia covering fiscal years 2020 through 2024 and incorporating proposed changes with respect to fiscal year 2019, which is to be submitted to the Mayor, to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Authority, the authority pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement, authorized by an ordinance of this Council, approved by the Mayor on January 3rd, 1992, by and between the Mayor and the City and the authority.
Thank you. Today we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills just read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal 2020, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal 2020 through fiscal 2025. Today we'll hear testimony from the administration on the capital budget and capital program.
The first person to testify from the administration is Eleanor Sharp and Ed Adams.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Council President Clark and members of City Council. My name is Eleanor Sharp. I'm the Executive Director of the City Planning Commission. With me is Anna Adams, the City's Budget Director. We are here to present for your review and consideration the recommended fiscal year 2020 to 2025 capital program and fiscal year 2020 capital budget, which was approved by the City Planning Commission on February 28, 2019. The recommended program is a 6-year plan for investing in the city's physical and technology, infrastructure, neighborhood and community facilities, city-owned buildings, and specialized vehicles. The recommended budget reflects the spending appropriations for the first year of the 6-year program. As both the program and budget are key instruments of planned physical development, the Philadelphia Home Rule Charter directs that their initial preparation and submission to the Mayor be a function of the City Planning Commission. The City Planning Commission and the Finance Department's Office of Budget and Program Evaluation began to prepare these recommendations in early fall of last year, working closely with the Department of Public Properties, Capital Projects Division, the Managing Director's Office, as well as individual departments. This collaborative process produces a capital program and budget that advance the city's comprehensive plan, address capital needs, and aligns with our financial resources and spending capacity. The recommended 6-year capital program calls for over $1.1 billion of new city tax-supported general obligated bond funding to support public improvements throughout Philadelphia. When possible, city funds are purposefully programmed to leverage additional resources provided by our valued regional, state, federal, and private partners. Considering all sources of expected new funding, including for aviation and water, the recommended capital program proposes more than $9.6 billion of additional improvements. Including carry forward appropriations from previous years, the overall fiscal year 2020 to 2025 recommended capital program envisions investments totaling more than $10.8 billion. For fiscal year 20, the recommended capital budget calls for $194.1 million of new general obligation bond funding. This is $20 million more than the $174 million appropriated by City Council for the last fiscal year 2019 capital budget, and it would continue the city's steady progress to boost capital investment. The city's financial constraints prevent the city from issuing large amounts of debt, as a debt issuance would raise the city's fixed cost above the current levels. The capital budget would support new general obligation bond funding for 16 of the 19 departments that rely on general obligation dollars for at least part of their capital investments. This includes funding in fiscal year 2020 for new voting machines. The recommended capital budget also reflects better integration between departments' operating and capital budgets. The projects included in the recommended capital program and budget complement the Mayor's priorities to invest in safety and justice, inclusive growth, and quality government services. Our submitted testimony highlights several examples. We are pleased to propose these significant investments, but we know they do not include all the projects that departments requested, nor do they include everything envisioned in the department master plans and facility plans. The amount of recommended new spending in this year's capital program and budget is limited, in part to ensure that city departments continue to spend down or reprogram prior year carry-forward funds before the city incurs new tax-supported debt. Departments have made progress on this, as the amount of carry-forward dollars calculated for fiscal year 2020 is significantly less than in fiscal year 2019. We also keep an eye on Philadelphia's ratio of debt service to total expenses, especially considering recent and planned complementary borrowings, such as for the Rebuild Initiative, housing programs, energy conservation, and Fire Department Logistics Center. Increasing city borrowing means increasing debt service and fixed costs, reducing the city's budgetary flexibility and potentially impacting the city's bond rating. Given our financial constraints, however, the administration is committed to investing in the city's infrastructure to the greatest extent possible. City agencies are working to implement projects already in the pipeline and to improve project identification, design, and construction for projects in the future. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Anna and I would like to address any questions that you may have. Please note also that the leadership of city departments are present, in addition to representatives from the Department of Finance, Office of Budget and Program Evaluation, and the Department of Public Property to assist in answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony. I'm going to start out with a couple of quick questions. The thing that a lot of people are talking about, in your FY20 capital program, we've indicated you have additional, basically $28 million in city-supported funds for reconstruction of streets and resurfacing. First, can you tell me how many miles that will include? And second, this whole issue about trenching and our ability to manage trenching that will require or request other utilities utilize or place their infrastructure in the streets at the same time, because it's frustrating to not only us but citizens when they see a street repaved and 2 weeks later somebody comes by and digs the street up. And the public sector also, this whole issue with respects to plumber's ditches, for lack of a better term, after the street's paved. And then there's this ongoing issue about when is the plumber's ditch going to be repaired, and is there substandard material with the private sector plumber's ditch, and it makes this whole notion of us repaving streets basically moot. And it's like, what was the point if we're going to have all these inadequate plumber's ditches and other types of trenching for utility purposes? Long question, I know, but I think
I think we can probably take it in a couple of chunks. So I'm Anna Adams, the city's budget director, and so I know that Rich is here from the streets department. He can kind of give more specifics. But
right.
There are many people here who can help answer some of these questions. Our goal is to get to the 131 miles of streets repaved annually, and we'll hit that in FY23. In FY21, with the amount that you talked about, we're expecting to get to 101 miles, but I know Rich and Mike can talk in more details.
Good morning, Council President. Richard Monson is Deputy Commissioner of Streets Department. Yeah, our goal is to get to 131 miles. Last year we did just under 100. This year we're expected to be just shy of 110 miles. We are coordinating all our efforts with PGW and PWD and other utilities. And we are also hoping to work with PWD as to cite property owners when they have bad laterals prior to us going in and repaving a street. As you know, the city has that, or put out that insurance on the laterals that it's about $8 a month, and we're hoping residents take advantage of that.
Good morning, Council President, members of Council. Mike Carroll, Deputy Managing Director for the Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability. Just to echo what Mr. Montanez is saying here, we are working very closely with PGW and with PWD around the issues of coordination. So we just have stood up in the past year the next version of the software that we use. We've trained them up on using it. So we're hopeful that this year, through that software and other efforts to meet with them monthly, incorporating other utilities, other folks who work in the right-of-way, we're going to have a better result this year. You may recall yesterday that Commissioner Williams had indicated that we've tightened up our contract process so that we're basically narrowing the amount of time we expect for streets to be open. That does present a little bit of a challenge because we want to make sure that all the utilities have an opportunity to get in there before the paving is completed, but we're confident we're going to have a better result this year. Also want to point out that in working with PGW and PWD, we have let them know that we intend to put forward what we're calling a paving moratorium program. It's similar to how PennDOT manages their paving and the work that takes place after paving, so that when folks come in and they do significant work after fresh paving has taken place, they then take on the responsibility to repave sections of street up to a block length in order to restore fresh pavement behind them when their work is done. So because PGW and PWD had just done rate cases and this work is coming in after those rate cases, we have to work with them a little bit because they have to have the resources in order to pay for this additional work. And so we're trying to get their practices up to speed, but our intention is to introduce this moratorium this year.
Okay, so we can anticipate seeing some improvement in
Yes,
the
yes.
because of the coordination utilizing technology. I'm hearing what you're saying.
Okay.
Kind of like every year this comes up. So we'll look forward to Water Department. Water Department here? I don't necessarily want anybody to leave. I just want it, because the Water Department is doing a significant level of hey, how you doing? I thought you retired.
Next week.
You still hanging? All right. I didn't want you to go, but
Thanks.
yeah. So the issue with the infrastructure, because the Water Department is doing a significant level of infrastructure with stormwater, the whole 9 yards, and the coordination between the two. Is there any significant coordination between the stormwater management infrastructure, i.e. sidewalks and other types of things that are actually in the street? Can you tell me how you all are working together on that?
Yes, good morning, Deborah McCarty, Water Commissioner for a little bit. We, just like with what's in the street, public right-of-way, we coordinate with Streets Department through the JEPAS, as Deputy Managing Director Carroll mentioned. And so anything we're doing in the street as well as the footway, that's always coordinated through Rich Montanez's team.
Mm-hmm. All right, so everybody's working together. We should expect great things this year.
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you we're perfect, but we're working toward making sure that, once the street has been paved, we don't go back until, don't have capital work until after the moratorium.
All right. Okay. I mean, I'm just passing it on. I had a lot of complaints about people.
Right, and it's something that's very important to us because, it's very frustrating to have a nicely paved street and then the next week someone comes out and digs it up. Yeah. I mean, some of it I think is unavoidable. I was telling someone, in my neighborhood, they paved a few blocks, and then the next week, someone had a gas leak. PGW was out there digging it up, so now there's that ditch there. But
so there, in terms of the plumber's ditches or other types of use, is there a requirement for a certain standard as it relates to the fill? I mean, does the city have a certain standard in terms of filling in the ditch?
I think Rich probably, I could talk to that, but I'll let Rich, because he's the expert, speak to that. I mean,
Good morning, Council President Clark. My name is Richard Monson, as Deputy Commissioner of Streets. So yes, we do have a standard. We actually do provide free fill to any plumber who digs. They just have to go to a streets facility that has it, make the arrangements, and we give them the fill for free. We also take the contaminated fills that they give us, and we dispose of it. So we do provide all the necessary material for them to properly fill. After they give us notice that they're completed, the streets department goes out there and then restores the ditch within 30 days.
30 days? Yeah,
Yes.
So that's another issue. It's like, it takes so long.
We are working on that time, sir.
well, the plumber is responsible for that ditch, though, during that period of time. So we've been known to call a plumber back and say, that ditch isn't taken care of, and they have to fix it.
I think one of the issues that we're trying to get a better handle on and have had some success over the past years is getting the inspection resources that need to be on the street, keeping an eye on the plumbers. And so we've worked with individual plumbers. We've worked with the water department to establish the standards, and also through the streets department in terms of them understanding the process and them following the process. Right. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that there's eyes on the street to keep them honest and do the enforcement. So that's something we're continuing to work on to build that capacity up.
Okay.
Well, and if I may add, you might recall recently, there's now you need a permit to replace a lateral. And with that cost comes inspection, making sure that the plumber is installing the pipe properly, but also backfilling properly and tamping, which is very important, and that will keep the ditch from sinking like we see so many
So
of
do
these.
we have enough workforce to deal with that issue?
Yes, we've staffed up. And
We're staffed up?
Yep.
So we
Yep.
don't need to raise the
And
fees anymore, right?
Shouldn't.
All right, I'm just saying, yeah. All right, over here. Mr. Carroll, will you be back at some point?
Yes.
I'm going to talk to you about traffic-related issues. This is capital, so I know
Yeah.
Will you be back
I
on the
certainly
streets?
will. Certainly
I
will.
wanna talk to you about public safety officers.
Yes. Yeah.
And what your role may be.
Okay.
All right, so not right now.
Happy to do that, and probably will want police involved in that conversation as well. So streets hearing will be a good opportunity, and I'll make sure that somebody from the managing director's office or from police can help answer some questions about that as well.
All right.
Thank you.
Real quick, and I'll turn it over. I-95. Let me ask this question for Councilman Squilla. He might actually know this. We made a commitment to do a significant investment on the capping of I-95. Can you kind of tell me where that is? Status of that proposal?
Yes, so we're on schedule. Right now, we're in design phase. We're working with PennDOT, who's actually the day-to-day manager of that project. Mm-hmm. There's been a series of community meetings and also a lot of outreach to the city or within the city. Various city departments will be involved at different stages. So Parks and Rec, of course, has an interest. Public Property has an interest, working with the RWC, who's involved in the trail portion of the project. So things are on target. Still very much expect that project to be wrapped up 2024 on schedule.
And what's the schedule?
2024.
2024?
Construction complete. Construction should start, I believe, 2022. Give me a minute and I can verify that.
All right, and you may or may not know about this. I know that's a little. So, based on the project plan that I saw, there was a number of developments that were part of the justify the need or the willingness for us to spend so much money on CAP 95. There was a lot of private sector development that was proposed for the site. couple of residential, some commercial activity, and that was the justification for the public commitment of significant dollars. And I didn't know who was managing that part of it or who's responsible for ensuring that the private sector investment was going to happen. Because we weren't just simply capping it just to cap it. It was a number of developments that were going to happen as a result of that. Is there anybody here that can speak to that?
Ann Fadulin, my boss, would probably speak best to that, but I don't think we've made any, we haven't tackled that yet because the project is still in design, but it's in the works to be addressed.
She's not here.
She's not here. She will be here.
I mean, that's kind of important.
She will be here.
We're spending a lot of money on
Yes.
this. You know, I love parks, but you know, it's a lot of money just for a park. So, is she around?
I think
Do you know?
calling her.
Can we get her? That's like kind of important to me.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to hand it off. Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning. I have several questions, but I'll start off with, I'm just trying to find out an answer. What is it, I know that our interest payments in the last 4 years have increased from 140 million to 187 million. It's a 33% increase in 4 years, which is pretty dramatic. What is the total amount of debt that's outstanding tied to those interest payments?
I know the city treasurer is here, so she can come and help answer that.
Good morning, Rashida Johnson, City Treasurer. They didn't give me the debt. So you want the interest for our GO for what year? I'm sorry?
Well, I think when 4 years ago, the interest payments were about 140 million. Today, they're 187 million. They've gone up 47 million. It's a 33% increase. What I want to know is, what's the amount of total outstanding debt, the dollar figure that services, that those interest payments service?
I don't have that. Give me, okay.
Are you referring to a certain page in the 5-year plan?
Excuse me?
Oh, sorry. Are you referring to a certain page in the 5-year plan? I just want to make sure we're looking at the same numbers.
I'm not referring to any page. I'm just asking you, like, if I said to you, how much money do you owe in debt? That's the question I'm asking.
Oh, that's what you're asking, the total amount of debt outstanding? Okay. I think we were just a little confused by your question.
Do you have your debt chapter here? Give me 1 second. Just to...
Sure. Should I ask another question while we're waiting, maybe?
Yeah.
Just to be more efficient with the time? We'll come back to that. What capital projects in this budget are aimed at reducing the city's poverty rate and deep poverty rate?
I think one of the things that we do in the capital budget is that we look at this is an infrastructure plan, and there are many things that infrastructure can do to improve economic development and community development, and we know that around the city. So obviously our investment in roads is an economic development strategy as much as many other things. Investing in our physical assets in terms of our recreation centers, our libraries, our playgrounds, all of these things have a positive impact on the community, and particularly in areas impoverished where we know that the usage of our facilities is even higher. I think the direct impact on poverty is a very difficult one to make that case for, but we do know that almost everything that we do as a city serves people. Most of our residents, a significant portion of our residents live in poverty and use our facilities. All of our investments are made with that in mind, both in the operating budget and the capital budget. I think kind of tying any specific initiative to a anti-poverty initiative would be hard, but I think the overall strategy of growth and safety and justice and quality government services effect hit poverty throughout many different ways.
So based on that, since fiscal year 16, the administration's been required to submit a cost-benefit analysis for any proposed new capital project. This analysis is required to include, and this is under Philadelphia Code 21-2200. It's required to include the life cycle cost of the project, the benefits of the project, the analysis of alternatives to the proposed investment, the projected return on capital investment, and the rationale for proceeding with the project. Based on that, can the administration provide us with the cost-benefit analysis for this year's new capital projects?
Yes, we can do that.
So is that something you can submit to the chair?
Yes.
Okay. And then my other question, going back in time, when I learned about this, I said, wow, this is great. So based on that, can you provide us with the last 3 years' cost-benefit analysis of the capital budget, and in particular, the analysis of the 400 North Broad Street purchase?
Yes.
And then, is there also an analysis on 46th and Market that was done prior to your administration that we could see?
We can find out.
That would be a very important analysis to see, because that analysis obviously didn't pan out the way we thought it would, but I'd like to see that one also. So, any idea of the time frame on when we can get those analyses?
Well, I think we'll need to look and see what's already been done, but we'll aim to get it to you before the end of the budget process.
Okay, thank you. According to the city's bond calendar, there's an upcoming bond sale of $356 million in new money on the bond calendar, but the budget only shows $194 million in new money investments.
That's right.
Any idea why there's a difference or what those proceeds are going to be used for?
We typically borrow for 2 years.
2-year borrowing. That's why it shows that way. Okay, thank you. And where does the city hold these proceeds from bonds before they are spent? Is this fund, are they held in a bank, or where are these funds held?
The funds are held with our custodian per the bond documents and invested by our money managers.
And is that fund reconciled?
Is that fund reconciled as the money flow? Yes, it is. As part of our overall cash reconciliation.
So it's part of that whole reconciliation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. And so we are already getting a copy of those reconciliations for the capital funds. That's part of the information you're submitting?
Yes.
One last question for now. For this, Philadelphia Municipal Authority is responsible for what type of bonds? And what are they used for?
So I could get you the full explanation, but there's specific chart of the bonds that they're responsible for, but it's more like for the lease purchase of machines, equipment, and things of that nature.
You'll supply us that, what it's used for?
buildings, excuse me.
Right. And who manages Philadelphia Municipal Authority?
I'm sorry?
Who manages it?
There's a board for the Philadelphia Municipal Authority as well as an executive director.
How much in dollars do you think is actually the total bonds through Philadelphia Municipal Authority?
For the, I can get you that information. Give me a few seconds.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just having questions in reference to some of the comments in the budget and also looking at the capital program. In particular, looking at aviation, looks like it's going to be $306 million. Is that correct in reference to new money regarding aviation?
I know the head of the airport is here, so she can answer any specific questions about the airport.
Shelley Cameron, CEO of the city's Division of Aviation. Councilman, could you please repeat your question?
Just looking at the capital program, looks like for aviation for 2020 is about $306 million in new money for aviation.
Correct.
And I guess my question is, what's the timing on that? And also, and it's probably a question for also Ms. Johnson in reference to the FAs and bond counsel and underwriters that we're using for that and the timing.
Rashia can address the question, like you said, about the bond counsel and everything. The timing on our deal would probably be before the summer. So
okay.
That's correct.
Again, Rashia Johnson, City Treasurer. Could you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, just want to get a sense of the rotation of bond counsel, underwriters, and FAs that we're using for aviation as well as other new money for this year?
Well, we haven't selected teams for this year, but we have a pool of FAs, underwriters, and bond counsel for all of our transactions. And as of the second quarter of this year, I believe we are at 50% with using MBE, WBE, DBE firms.
Okay, all right. This is also a question more so from a, I guess, capital program perspective. It looks like in your testimony you talked about purchasing new vehicles this year.
That's right.
Okay. Looks like some of the, could you give me a breakdown of the type of vehicles? It looks like most of the vehicles are for the fire department, and are there other vehicles? Well, give me the nature of the type of vehicles that will be purchased.
So in the capital budget, the types of vehicles that we buy are typically the very expensive ones, the large fire vehicles, the street sanitation trucks, the heavy equipment needed for many of the department's operations. So they're primarily fire and streets vehicles. There are occasionally there are vehicles that are bought for other departments, but they're primarily in fire and streets.
Beyond those type of heavy machinery, other type of vehicles that are traditional cars, has there been any thoughts in reference to going forward as we do procurement, thinking about electric vehicles for a procurement perspective?
I think there's a few people who can answer those types of questions, including Mike Carroll.
Good morning, Councilman. Mike Carroll, Deputy Managing Director, Office of Transportation Infrastructure Sustainability. Those types of vehicles tend not to be capital purchases, but we're working through a strategy, regardless of whether they're being paid for out of capital dollars or not, to look at a sustainable fleet. And so electric vehicles factor heavily in that conversation. Also, we're going to be evaluating other options, which will include clean natural gas, clean diesel. So that work is really just getting kicked off. And so we're looking to work with some experts around the country, also take a look at models around the country about how to make a conversion. But the goal is over time for us to switch to alternative fuels as much as possible and to serve the city's goals in terms of decarbonization over time as well. We want to be a model for other entities throughout the city and lead by example in doing that work.
And so because those other vehicles are larger in size, those are on the capital side as opposed to other vehicles being on the operating side?
That's right.
Okay.
But those large vehicles are on the table as well, just to be clear, because there's new alternatives that are starting to come to market, and we're exploring how viable they are and how they fit with our procurement needs. Okay.
Also, in the testimony, there were some questions I think you talked about new voting machines. And I just want to get a sense, what's the total cost for the new voting machine project?
So the total cost from all sources, you mean, in terms of operating and capital?
Mm-hmm.
So the procurement department are in negotiations right now with a couple of different vendors. So we have included a variety of costs in the operating budget and capital budget. There's still a lot, I will say it's a lot of moving pieces. There's a steering committee that's working with the City Commissioner's Office with representatives from all over the administration and City Council. So we can get you the full breakdown of what we've included in the budget, although I do think that it's likely to keep moving as the negotiations continue.
So can you give a kind of a range of how much will be on the operating versus capital?
Yeah, so you can see in the capital budget there's a direct amount in the finance for voting machines of $22 million.
Right, 22.
There's also funding in the, we added funding for poll books in the Commissioner's budget. There's funding for a contract in the Office of Innovation and Technology for $1 million over 2 years for an outside vendor to help work as a kind of owner's rep to help with that project. There's also funding that we've set aside in the Department of Public Property for a new warehouse, although that's still a lot of conversations about where that warehouse would be and what's needed in that warehouse. We've also added funding for both the maintenance costs as well as the security costs for the poll books and for the new machines in the City Commissioner's budget. We're trying to net out the costs of the maintenance of the old machines, and there's obviously an overlap in FY20 where we'll still have to maintain the old machines as well as the new machines. And so I can give you the breakdown of all of those numbers. I do think it's likely to change. Probably as we go through the budget process, we'll need to make adjustments to those budgets. But we've put a tentative amount which we hope is close to where it's going to end up, but it could move around a little bit.
And the source of the funding for the capital side of the voting machines, is that new money?
Yes, the state budget included $15 million annually for the next 5 years statewide. It's not clear to us yet how much of that state funding will be allocated to Philadelphia. We don't also know whether that's on a reimbursable basis. We don't really know how that money will flow, but it will. And so we're still in conversations with the state to understand that a little bit more.
Okay. And then one last question, because the buzzer has rung. So the operating costs for the new machines, will that be in the city commissioner's budget or in?
So the actual maintenance and the security, yes, that will all be in the city commissioner's budget, and you can see that in their budget. The owner's rep, which I mentioned before, to help with the sort of the navigation of the project, that's in the Office of Innovation and Technology's budget, and then the warehousing costs is in the Department of Public Property's budget.
Okay. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thanks. I see mention about talking a lot about transportation, I think, but it's mentioned about SEPTA proposed investments.
Yes.
I saw in the paper today where particularly bus ridership has gone down fairly significantly. Could you detail a little bit about particularly when it provides, or what is being provided to try to improve bus service?
Yeah, so we've got a few things going on. It's a trend that's not just Philadelphia, but around the country. Right. Bus ridership's been declining over the last 6-7 years. And I think what we're hopeful we can do is turn that trend around by really sharpening the quality of service overall, but also focusing on work we're hoping to kick off with SEPTA to take kind of a broad view of the whole network and look for opportunities to really optimize the way that the network is functioning, serving people, getting them where they need to be. The focus being on increasing as much as possible the frequency of buses on the high volume routes, and working to establish a little bit more logic where it has benefit in terms of the way that people make trips. So if it's possible for people to get to a stop, expect a bus to come sooner, and then have that bus travel faster, the question we need to really work with you guys and the rest of the community about is, does it make sense to shift some of the routes around? Mm-hmm. And then does it make sense for us to make it a little bit longer to walk to a stop? And so the answer isn't always going to be yes, and I think we need to really listen to people to figure out what the trade-offs are for individuals. But work was done preliminarily to try and identify the benefits, and there's actually a significant increase that we may get in terms of the number of jobs people can get to, the number of educational opportunities that people can get to within a half-hour or 45-minute period, which is, a reasonable travel time over a larger section of the city. And so that work is just getting kicked off, like I said, and hopefully in the next 24, 36 months or so, we have a concrete plan. We're going to bring the public along the whole way and make sure that there's plenty of engagement around this work. So I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There is money that has been set aside in this capital budget to kind of work with SEPTA to do that engagement, do some planning in order to kick that work off.
And I know we can talk when SEPTA comes in a little bit more, but I think I've raised this question before. I know there's the issue, particularly in off-peak hours, where there's less service. Yeah. And I never knew if that was a chicken or egg story. Was it there less people take it because there's less service, or there's less service because people don't take it?
Yeah.
But it does seem like that's, and I think this story said that, particularly in the off-peak hours, it fell off.
There's some fact-finding we need to do. And so we haven't got much past the anecdotes that you hear from people about they wish there was a bus that could take them on a Saturday or a Sunday.
Right.
But what we see in other cities is when that service is available, it does get used. I'd
That's
also
what I would
say,
think, yeah.
I'd also say that there's an equity issue baked into that, because a lot of people who have a second job or they work odd shifts, they work the weekends, they work Saturday, Sunday, really kind of they're at a disadvantage getting to work, getting to the things that they need to do, because there's a difference in the level of service provided. So that is a focus that we're hoping to work with SEPTA around.
Yeah, and I think it's important for different groups, certainly seniors. Some seniors don't drive anymore.
That's right.
Some people have this.
Yep.
Try, like I do. So it's a certainly important issue.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Real quick, Mr. Carroll, can you, 1 second? Yeah. Bike lanes, protected bike lanes is a capital issue at some point, possibly?
Yes.
The percentage, is there like a certain percentage of protected bike lanes that you will be doing? We will, the city.
Yeah.
Or is it certain criteria established for protected bike lanes?
So we're involved right now, and folks, should take a look at the Connect Transportation Strategic Plan we put out this past October in developing what we call the high quality network. And so there's a little bit of a shift in focus there, less emphasis on hitting specific milestones in terms of mileage or percentage, like you say, and more in terms of identifying the key connections that create a network. And so we've kind of taken on some of the heavy lifting first, to be perfectly honest with you. So there's streets that have recently got protected facilities. Very grateful for the opportunity to pilot protected bike lanes on Market JFK. People are aware of the work that we've done on Chestnut Street. Currently, we're looking for opportunities on 10th Street, 13th Street. This spring, we're going to be doing work on on Spruce and Pine to improve the quality of the bike.
Now, are you talking about Center City, because Spruce and Pine and Chestnut Market?
Yeah. So
you're primarily talking about Center City?
Right now, yes, and that doesn't mean we're excluding opportunities to work elsewhere, but it feels like that's where we get the best bang for the buck for the work that we do. And ultimately, this is where people who are traveling not by car want to be a lot of the time. So we have a chance to work in a geography that's very conducive to riding a bike, and we understand we have to manage the impacts to transit, the impacts to traffic and pedestrians as well around this bike network. But we feel like if we get it on the map, it really starts the conversation about where these routes should be, and then the types of routes they should be, and the level of protection we can provide.
Okay. So let me get to what I really want to ask you. So, and I asked you about protected bike lanes because there's obviously some sense of permanency. Mm-hmm. And so there are a number of bike lanes that have been put in. I want to talk to you about Yorktown in particular, because I've gotten not necessarily beat up, but there's been some interesting conversations around the 13th Street bike lanes through Yorktown, and most of those conversations were not good conversations. And the people said that they had actually had one conversation with the folks from the city. They didn't say who from the city. Mm-hmm. And the next thing that they knew, that there was this dramatic change in vehicular traffic because of the bike lanes that were put up. Are you familiar with those?
So I'm not familiar with the circumstance you're talking about, a shift or diversion of traffic resulting from.
Well, they basically, Yorktown, 13th Street pretty much was like 2 lanes of traffic going north until you got up to Cecil B. And then Temple, it went down to 1. Mm-hmm. So basically, they took the parking lane. And they moved the parking lane to the middle of the street. They put the bike lane towards the curb.
Right.
So you now have parking just kind of like on both sides of the street.
Right.
So the folks in Yorktown are quite upset because, one, they said nobody ever came back with the final presentation. 2, they don't like it because of, and it's a significant senior population. There's actually 2 senior citizen complexes. Because they now have to walk out and be concerned about the bike lane first, and then they have
crossing the bike lane.
And they've given me letters in the whole 9 yards. So my question is is there like some regulations established about what the city can do in implementing bike lanes without any real public requirement? Like, I'm not finished. So I know like when there's a zoning issue or something else in the city, you know, they have RCOs. We have established these RCOs, and you have to get the approval of an RCO. But it seems like the streets department just kind of like goes out and does what it wants to do.
Well, I'd say
without any real authorization.
No, I'd say if there's a change in parking, certainly if there's a reduction in the travel lanes, we are obligated to get legislation. Yorktown, there's probably
I don't agree with that. I did not pass any legislation on 13th Street.
So
I actually didn't pass legislation on JFK or Chestnut or Market yet.
So I'm going to stand by what I said with respect to a reduction of travel lanes. I think the situation on 13th there was that there were never two travel lanes. On 13th, there was one wide travel lane, and so we took
So there were never two official travel lanes.
That's right. That's right.
For years and years, two cars have been traveling up 13th.
And I mean, I'll be honest, that's not a condition we want. I mean, we don't want ambiguity of whether there's one lane or two lanes. And when there's one 15-foot wide lane, the tendency is that people are going to speed down that lane. And so in that kind of context where it's a neighborhood and like you say, there's seniors on the street, we really don't want people to feel like, unobstructed, they can just race down from block to block. So that kind of project we take on not just to add the capacity for bikes or to extend the bike network.
But who gets to decide that? It's like you guys just do what you want to do and heck with the community. And that really because I can't even do that. I got elected, right? I can't just do what I want to do.
Sure,
right?
I'm not going to say that the process was perfect. Well, we'll be happy to take information from you and work with the community to try and explain what we do, feedback. If there's modifications, we want to do that. But when it's coming to whether you've got a 9-foot lane, a 10-foot lane, a 15-foot lane, that's an engineering decision at the end of the day. Why is it 15 feet? If there's a type of vehicle, what we call design vehicle, that needs to traverse that stretch of road, and it's a big truck or it's a bus, typically we find 12 feet is adequate. Sometimes we can go as narrow as 10.5 feet, but we try and keep it around 11 because there's a trade-off in terms of making sure that the turns can take place at the intersections, making sure there's no side swipes for vehicles parked along the street, and then the fact that you're kind of inviting people to race down the street if it's an extremely wide street. And, there's enough knowledge in terms of traffic engineering, transportation design, that we've accumulated over the years and looking at our peers and talking with them, that we tend to take that on as, that's what our profession's about, to try and make these types of adjustments.
So the citizens don't matter. That's kind of like what I'm getting from you. You're telling me about the engineers and
I would never say
all the department heads, and it's like the citizens don't matter because you're the professionals.
Yeah.
So the people on 13th Street in Yorktown, their perspective doesn't matter.
They were involved in community meetings with us. We do have letters of support from the community organizations there.
They gave me a letter talking about the fact that you guys had not come back. You were supposed to come back, have a follow-up meeting, and they said that never happened.
Okay.
And the next thing they did, they woke up. I talked to Priscilla Woods and all those folks over there. And the next thing they did, they woke up and the lanes were there.
We would be happy to go back and have more conversations with them. I never want to give the impression that we know best and we're going to do what we're going to do. And I think
it's kind of like what you just said.
Yep.
You talked about your years of experience and, you've amassed this knowledge of what's best and, I can't.
That's what we bring.
When I try that, I get written up in the paper.
Council President, that's what we bring to the. That's what we bring to the table. But we're coming to the table. So we know some things. The residents know some things. We need to share our knowledge of the situation. We don't know the neighborhood as good as they do. So we need to hear from them.
Right.
And we need to talk with them. If we felt like we followed that process, in the meetings that we did have, in the letter that we did get, and perhaps we need to do a better job, but also in the conversations that we were trying to involve your staff with as well. So more work to do. Okay,
I
we
need
got
you
that.
guys to follow up with the Yorktown situation.
Understood.
Because that's 3 times I've been up there. I've gotten it, and they gave me a letter, and they gave me some petitions.
Understood.
All right, thank you. And then one last one. Commercial corridors. I think we actually had a conversation yesterday.
That's right.
Briefly. That's a capital issue.
Yes, there's a component that's yeah, we talked about yesterday how we did the pay-as-you-go last year and then in FY19, and we'll continue it throughout the plan.
So we're going to talk about accelerating or altering the regulatory process
That's
or legal
right.
process. So since we're talking, I'm bringing it, I know I brought it up yesterday.
You're wanting someone from Commerce to talk about that now? Is that what you're asking?
Whoever's...
Hello, Karen
How you
Fegley,
doing?
Deputy Commerce Director. So picking up where you left off with Harold yesterday, you got me today.
Yeah, let's get you on record. We're here. You know.
So we have, I think the discussion is our pipeline and how are we going to keep moving these projects. We've got a number of projects underway, so that's, I hope, good news. In 2018, there were 6 projects completed. We currently, as of sitting here, have 4 projects in construction, and we've got another 13 that are basically in design or just about to, of those 13, probably 6 of them will go into construction in this calendar year. So we are moving a bunch forward. The funding we have is all committed. And then we have a huge pipeline of projects. As you know, there is need all over the city. So we're trying to manage those and coordinate with the other departments as best as possible to leverage the money and, get the most bang for the buck. The coordination has definitely, there's a lot of really great coordination that's happened as far as when we seek other funds. One of the issues is usually we don't necessarily want to use just city capital to do one of these projects. They cost millions of dollars. If we're doing a full streetscape project where we're ripping up sidewalks and, installing curbs and sidewalks and lights and trees and all that. So we look to leverage that with grants from the state. And so we have to time it with applying for other funds, getting those funds in, coordinating with Streets Department to make sure that they have the capacity to sort of manage the commercial corridor projects in addition to the other projects that are typically on their plate, and then bringing in engineers and construction firms. Right now, our construction, the construction industry is pretty busy. So prices have been coming high, which then makes us sometimes go back and have to get more funds and that sort of thing. So it's a lot of timing and balance works out. I'm not saying the process can't be improved. There are certainly steps along the way, and we're looking at that, just as we're looking in a lot of city processes for improving the steps and the coordination, the interdepartmental coordination that needs to go on. So. Okay,
that's a little more detailed than yesterday's response. All right. Well, can you do me a favor? Can you just shoot us a memo?
Sure.
Just kind of
like a summary of all of that.
Challenges, it'll be helpful to us.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Faith. Chair recognizes Councilman Taubenberger.
Thank you. And this is for Mr. Carroll, and be very short, really, but I think important in regards to the capital plans and mass transit. You had said that mass transit ridership is down.
I was speaking specifically about bus travel, but that's a different story on the regional rail and the Market Frankfurt.
No. Bus is fine. And basically, I guess you would get that data from SEPTA, or do we?
Yeah, we work with SEPTA. We also sometimes can get data through the DVRPC, but most of our data will come from SEPTA.
From SEPTA directly. Your reasoning for the ridership on buses being down, do you think Uber has anything to do with it, and Lyft?
I think that's a factor. There's an article maybe from a year ago where they actually interviewed some people, and these are residents who are saying that depending on what they're feeling like that day, or whether they're in a hurry, or whether they feel like they're going to wait too long for the bus, they might take an Uber.
Correct. Now, it seems like Uber and Lyft and even, I guess, to some degree, taxi service, but certainly Uber and Lyft because it's so readily available through your telephone and other things, your apps and so on. Do you think that ridership would ever come back, or do you think that's gone?
Yeah, and I should also mention the story with, we call them the transportation network companies, TNCs, Uber, Lyft, whoever else is out there. They have an impact on our streets. I mean, there's something I saw that says about 20,000 vehicles are working for Uber and Lyft in any peak period of time, any peak congestion period of time in the city of Philadelphia. And that makes a difference. And so if they're all clustering on some of the corridors where people are trying to get north, south, east, west into center city, unfortunately, we haven't had great success keeping them out of bus lanes, keeping them out of travel lanes in general, where the bus is supposed to be. And so we feel like if we can get a better handle on them, better behavior, we're going to need data to do that. They probably should pay a fair share somehow or other. That improves the whole story for transportation.
Do you think it would be, of course, once again, enforcement if you
Yes.
stop someone there?
Yes. And I think, like I say, they have a role in helping to fund some of this enforcement too.
Well, let me ask you just one question along those lines. Enforcement is difficult because you need people power to do so.
That's right.
Occasionally. But on the worst traversed or where there is the most difficulty with cars in bus lanes, do you think a video camera would be helpful?
I certainly do. And the buses actually all have video cameras. So the question is,
that's correct. They
yes,
do.
it's an institutional question at that point. What authority and who is that authority reside with? But what authority is there to use that video to actually write tickets or somehow
Very
enforce?
interesting, because there was a proposal, and I'm not sure where it is, but it was certainly up for discussion and continued discussion, having SEPTA with their video camera actually mark cars via pictures for ticketing in parking places that are illegal, near bus stops and so on.
That's right, exactly, yeah. And so we've been working with our law department to understand what we feel like the rules will be like. We're exchanging information both with SEPTA and the PPA to get their opinions about what authority there exists, and we're hopeful we can make progress.
Do you think SEPTA, or excuse me, do you think that sort of legislation might encompass enabling legislation from the state?
Yeah, I mean, ideally we can use existing authority, but we're certainly we're certainly happy to try and get enabling legislation if that's the path that we have to take. I think there's certainly
sometimes that could be difficult
yes.
in the sense you're
yes,
dealing with another elected body.
That's right.
They're hundreds of miles.
But we feel like the benefit is clear enough that it's worth making the effort if that's the path we have to take.
Very interesting. I actually probably would like to talk to you further on that because I think there's some great ability to move things along. I mean, when enforcement is there, the problems lessen to a degree.
That's right.
So, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Ginn?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Hello.
Hello.
So I wanted to ask a few questions about the funds that we allocate to PIDC's Industrial Land Bank. I think the testimony says that there's $17 million in revolving funds for the Industrial Land Bank for PIDC. So, I don't understand it as well, and I'm wondering if you can help give some explanations around it.
Yeah, and actually there are some representatives from PIDC here, so they can come up.
Okay, great. Could you just clarify, are these parcels and projects managed by PIDC, or are they actually owned by PIDC?
In fact, they can help answer that.
Tom Dolfo will be here in a second.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Tom Dalfo. I'm Senior Vice President for Real Estate Services at PIDC. Councilwoman, if I think I understand your question, it's, let me try to answer it this way. The funds that show up in the city capital budget for the land bank represent proceeds revolved back into the fund. So they're not a new allocation of resources. And we put a request in the capital budget to authorize us to spend resources that have been revolved each year. So that's where that $17 million number comes. Part of it will be for acquisition if opportunities arise throughout the year, and part of it is for the engineering and maintenance and planning related to the assets. So the second part of your question, I think, had to deal with ownership. The properties are held and titled by the Philadelphia Authority for Industrial Development, which is where PIDC holds real estate. It's our related state industrial development authority.
Okay. So the properties are held by PAID. And could you clarify again, do you keep the proceeds of the future sales, or does that go back to the city?
We maintain it in an account on behalf of the city. So the funds stay in an account managed by PIDC on behalf of the city, and we report on it quarterly.
Okay, so you basically keep the proceeds.
We hold them for the fund to go back. Yes.
So it's that's $17 million.
The $17 million is authorization. The fund itself does not have $17 million in it at this point.
And this is new authorization, is that right?
It's authorization to spend the revolved dollars. So it's not new money. It's the ability to use the funds, if they're available, to do acquisition and to maintain the portfolio. So we have to do that as part of the land bank legislation each year.
Could you give me some perspective? Over the last 5 years, in terms of the sales that have gone through the industrial land bank, how much money has been gained? And again, to be clear, that money just stays in that fund that's managed by PIDC.
That's correct.
So it never comes back to the city at all?
No, it stays in a separate account we manage on behalf of the city, yes.
So how much money would you say has been appropriated back into the funds from the industrial land bank sales, selling off parcels over the last 5 years?
I'd have to look at our sales for the past 5 years. I don't have that number.
Do you know how many sales have occurred?
Not in the past 5 years. No, I did not.
Okay. And then you can get back to me and others on that. Great. Thank you. One of the things that I know we've been trying to track is the quality, and equity assurances that go along with many of your projects. Do you know how many jobs have been created in the last 5 years from the sales of these properties?
I don't have that either. We can look it up.
Do you know what the average salary of jobs that would therefore would be?
I do not.
Do you know whether we hire locally
for
jobs that might come through those?
It's up to the actual company who purchases the property and develops it. Many of those are companies that exist within the city and are relocating to larger, newer space. So their workforce would be consistent with what it was before, and most of those workforces for the industrial sites are local.
Do you not know because you have the information but you don't have it on hand, or do you not know because you don't track?
I don't have that information I don't have that information. We track employment, and we track the sales and the resources.
What aspects of employment do you actually track? When you say
jobs created.
Jobs created?
Jobs created.
Okay, you don't track what the income level is, whether they hire locally, whether there's a high school degree, whether there's any kind of other things that the city often tries to incentivize around job creation?
We do, as part of our land sales, when we do financing, which in many cases we do, that's often tracked.
That is not tracked.
That is often tracked as part of our financing, when our finance group provides financing for a project.
Sorry. You say that is often tracked?
Yes. Our financing team, as a condition of the financing we'll often put into a project, tracks that information, much of that information.
And so, therefore, you could get that information back to me?
If it's a transaction in which we also, in addition to selling the property, we also lent resources, then we would have that information, yes.
But it is not a condition of the sale?
It's not as part of the real estate transaction, no.
Then what determines whether you track or not track?
Whether or not we've provided financing.
Okay. All right, that's helpful. But if you could get any of the information that you have, that would be extremely helpful. Thank you very much. The second set of questions that I have to do with the libraries, so about capital investments. So the proposed capital program plans to invest about $2 million a year, including the rebuild funding, into the capital projects to repair our libraries. Has there been an assessment of the overall needs, of the capital needs of the library system, and could you provide it to us?
We can look into it, see what we have, and if what we have, we can definitely provide to you.
Do you believe that there is an assessment of the capital needs for the library system?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I can find out, and we can find out exactly. We sometimes have some analysis done of each branch, but we'll have a look and see what the latest studies have been on the library system as a whole.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. A few other questions. I just wanted to, I will say this, I'm a big fan of investing our money and having good investments. I'm not a big fan of wasting our money. And
I think we're all on the same page for that.
That's good. That's good. And I want to address what I think is a common theme. Is this poverty issue. You know, you look at, and this is, you supplied this information to us in your information on the budget hearings. You said that New York City has an 18% poverty rate and a deep poverty rate of 8.
That's right.
You guys supplied us information that New York City has an 18% poverty rate and a deep poverty rate of 8%. That Chicago's 19%, deep poverty is 8. That Houston's 21% and deep poverty is 9. And Philadelphia's 26 or 25.7% and deep poverty is 14. Of all the top 20 cities, we're the only one over 46%. We're at 54% of our poverty is deep poverty. And I say this in this context. This debt service has increased 33% in 4 years, 8.25% a year. In the prior administration, under 8 years, it increased 4% a year or 32%, half. And that was during a recession when borrowing was probably required to make ends meet.
Actually, we'll say we never borrowed for operating costs.
Okay.
That's not what we did. And even in the prior administration, I just want to make sure that's clear. We don't borrow for operating costs.
The borrowing now in the last 4 years is double what was borrowed in the prior
You're talking about the budgeted borrowing?
Yes, double. Yesterday we saw the operating budget has gone up 21% in 4 years, 21%. And in the prior 8 years, it went up a total of 2.5%.
Yes, and I think part of it is if you look at what, and we've been pretty clear, and I thought we addressed some of this yesterday, is that in the prior administration, due to the recession in particular, we did not invest in many of our infrastructure needs. And if you look at areas like, I would say, fleet management, where we didn't buy these large vehicles that are really needed for the fire department, for the streets department, you look at the aging level of our vehicles, it really has an impact on our operations. And you saw that, I think, a couple of years ago, you were asking about the streets department overtime. And one of the major issues was in the prior administration, because of the financial situation that we were in, they didn't buy compactors. And we see the implications of that in many ways. And I think if you look at many of our infrastructure needs, our library systems, I know that the councilwoman just talked about the library system, our homeless shelters, our recreation facilities, they really do need investment. And because of the financial situation in the prior administration, it was very difficult for them to increase the size of the capital budget. And they had to make those difficult trade-offs, just like we're having to make very difficult trade-offs now in all of our infrastructure. I mean, I think if you met with our departments when we were putting the capital budget together, there were so many infrastructure needs that were really, really important things that we could have been invested in had we had more resources. And we constantly weigh that up. And I think what we're proposing here isn't a sort of over-investment. I think it's trying to balance the really critical need of investing in our infrastructure.
No, I heard you yesterday. I still can hear. But this is my issue. And then let me finish the whole thing, then we can comment. This increased spending burdens those in poverty the most. The most. And we all agree we have the highest poverty and by far the highest deep poverty. We have the highest taxes of any big city. on existing residents and businesses. And where in this capital budget have we addressed job training, for example, in these areas of poverty? And let me go back to my opening comment about waste. This troubles me. This is the schedule of the borrowing at 46th and Market, where we borrowed $61 million of principal, $39 million of interest, $100 million. We start making payments in 2020. Every year till 2044, we're going to make a $4 million payment on a building we're selling for $10 million. You talk about what's causing, this is the waste piece that really troubles me. When we have this level of poverty, that $90 million we're going to lose, we could have invested it in job training, education, all these other areas. We could have used those resources so much better. And to me, this is a black eye when you lose $90 million of our taxpayers' money. So, in this capital budget, we can't go back. That's over. But in this capital budget, what I'm disappointed in, I'm disappointed that we're not having more funding, not just for education, which is extremely important, but for those people today who are out of jobs and need job training and need to be trained for this economy that is so drastically different than 20 years ago. So drastically different. And that's what we're not doing. And I would look at the power up that my colleague, Councilwoman Parker, advanced. A 13% return per year. It's tremendous for us. Those are the types of programs we need to be doing on a much bigger scale. Not on a small spec, not for 500 people, but on a big scale. You got 400,000 people in poverty. So my question is, when can we see that type of an investment in the people that are in poverty to take 100,000 people out? We need big, big capital spending for investing in job creation.
In the capital budget?
I don't care where you do it. I'm just saying, when I just lost $90 million in the capital budget, that is troubling to me because I could use that money to take a ton of people out of poverty.
And I understand your point, Councilman, and I think that's something, I think in the capital budget specifically, it's probably difficult for us to do it in the way that you're envisioning.
I don't care where it comes from.
But I agree.
You can figure it out. I'll leave it to you to get the details. You got the overview. That's my issue.
I understand.
How do you face the residents of this city when we lost $90 million on a job, when they're barely able to put food on the table, okay? That to me is what we need to invest in. Their opportunities for them to get not just $10, $12, $15 an hour jobs. I'm talking about real jobs, because $15 an hour, you're still in poverty. There's no change. I'm talking about creating more opportunities for entrepreneurship. I stated it yesterday. 78.6% of the businesses in Philadelphia are owned by white people. 10% are owned by Asian. 2.4 are African American. That's a disgrace. Where is the programs for us to train people to own their own businesses?
Yeah, and I think the Commerce Department can talk in more detail about their programs that they have when they come up in their operating budget, but I understand what you're saying, Councilman.
I don't want to talk about it. I want to see what we're going to do about it. Yeah. And that's part of what by the way, that's why I'm doing those programs I'm doing, because I don't want to talk. I just want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Bass?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I could not agree with you more, Councilman Dom. It's very frustrating when we see that the city of Philadelphia is spending a lot of money on projects, on buildings, on things that we're doing. And at the same time, we almost systematically exclude folks of color, women, from participating on these jobs. And we do it over and over again. I've had conversations with different departments, and throughout the course of this budgetary season, one of the things that I'm going to be constantly asking is, how are we spending our contract dollars to make sure that people who are located here in Philadelphia have an opportunity to bid on contracts and participate in what the city is doing. There's no way that we're going to lift people out of poverty if we don't include them in what we're doing. And I just think that that's a real basic. So I just wanted to add on to that. And I just had a really brief question about our spending. I understand the priorities. I understand the need to have so many priorities. We're an old city. We have a lot of old buildings. We need a lot of work on those old buildings because they've been neglected for so long.
That's right.
There have been, it seems as if there were years and years and years when there was absolutely none of the basic maintenance that was done to these properties. And so now we have a situation where you have roofs leaking and, things falling apart and, we're patching stuff together with duct tape, it seems like. And it's just a real very difficult situation that we're in right now. And so my specific question is about some of the facilities in my district, the police stations, the fire stations. I've been to them all. I know them all very well. I have to say that the conditions are deplorable in pretty much all of them. These are the places where our city employees work. They go to work there every single day. And with our fire stations, they sleep there overnight. And so in some of these places, nobody should be eating, sleeping, or operating out of these buildings, in my opinion, because they have significant issues and have had significant issues for a very long time. And so I noticed that there's about $23 million that's going towards the police department and capital improvements to update and renovate police stations, and that's citywide. So how many police stations are there throughout the city of Philadelphia?
The total number of police stations?
Yes.
I think the Commissioner of Public Property can come and answer many of these questions.
Good morning, still. I'm Bridget Collins-Greenwell, the Commissioner of Public Property. I had to double check on that. Hi, Councilwoman. So there are 25 that we are responsible for in the Department of Public Property.
So there's 25 police stations and we're allocating $23 million.
So there's $23 million allocated. A little bit goes to each police station. We have major projects that are going on this year in the 22nd, the 2nd, and the 15th. We also have that master plan that we're following the path on. So we're going by that to see what actual facilities we go to first and do holistically, meaning that we go and fix everything at one time, and which ones we go and just kind of do the basics for and then move on.
Okay, so that list is out. Is that available?
The master plan's out. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm just, $23 million, as you know, is just a drop in the bucket. Do we have an overall idea of what the need is for these stations?
We do have an estimate that's included in that master plan of what the overall need is to do all the HVAC, roofs, everything like that. Yes.
What's that estimate? Do you know?
I believe it off the top of my head. I want to say 150, but let me double check that.
So 150 million, and we're putting in about 23.
Well, it's 150 million, but it would have to be phased in anyway, because you couldn't, you know what I mean, just close, all the police stations and everything.
Yeah, I just, when I go into my stations and when my constituents go in and the conditions that they see, it's absolutely, it's just not what it should be, what it could be. And so I understand that spending is tight, it's tight all around, but when we look at our city facilities, I just really want to make a push and a plea and advocate that we really try to figure this out in shorter order, because the conditions are just absolutely outrageous. And I know that you already know this, but I really just wanted to be on the record and state that, because, again, when I go out to my stations and some of the things I see, and I don't want to say online because I don't want to gross everybody out, but I'd be happy to have an offline conversation with you about some of the conditions that exist and some of the problems that need to be cleaned up immediately.
Sure.
So, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Council Lady. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gim.
Hi. Just a quick question about stormwater management programs.
We have a representative from the What's the department?
Hello. Okay. All right. So I'm just wondering. Hi, Commissioner McCarty. Good morning. No run. Don't need to run.
Everybody deserves it.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So could you just give me an update on the school-based stormwater management programs, and maybe a little bit about what the projects looked like 5 years ago and what the projects are looking like today and what you see it going towards?
Well, we're continuing to work with the school district on the grants that they are getting from the department to do stormwater management practices at the schools, and working toward getting agreements for the water department to do stormwater management practices on school district property.
And so roughly what would you say the funding looked like 5 years ago versus today versus where you see it being in the future, specifically around the school-based work? You said you had grants available.
Right, so they take advantage of they've been able to take advantage of our grants program to install stormwater management practices at their facilities.
So what did the grants look like 5 years ago?
I'm sorry.
How much was distributed 5 years ago through your...
I don't have those numbers. We can get that for you.
Okay. Has it been growing or shrinking?
Well, there's a number of folks that can take advantage of our grants. So school district is one of them. There are other entities as well. The overall program has grown.
Okay.
But off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you.
And it's just a stable source of funding? It's replenished every year, or is it expected to expire?
Well, it depends upon, so this past rate case, the rate board saw fit to approve us to increase the amount of money in the grants for the next 2 years. But it's, it is somewhat dependent upon what the rate board approves and what our rate base can afford.
Okay. And do you expect that to be sizable, like enough to do multiple projects, or do you think it'll just, I know it's hard to tell, but do you have a general ballpark?
It's currently $25 million, which is a lot of money, and can fund quite a few projects.
And do you know how many schools have actually benefited from the grant programs thus far?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. There are quite a few, though.
Is it like 2 dozen? Is it 10? Is it more than that?
Yeah, we can get back to you.
Okay. All right. And so the current amount of money in the grants is about $25 million. And roughly, like when a school applies, how much money is expected to be granted?
Depends upon the project.
How big? What's the range?
It could be a couple $100,000. I mean, we've funded larger projects, not necessarily for the school district, but, $1 million. Depends.
Okay. And did you say like you could do $1 million for a school district, or is that? I know you say other communities.
It depends
can apply
upon the
for
project.
Grants, right? I'm talking, but specifically school-based grants. What do they usually range from?
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Okay.
We'll get back to you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Ms. Fadulin, all right. Yeah, there was a follow-up question I had. How you doing?
Good.
Good. I was asking questions about the capping of I-95, and I noticed that when the discussion was had earlier about the justification for spending a significant amount of money can't just be for a park.
Right.
So there was a proposal to discuss several retail, residential, other types of activity. And my question was, who's responsible for managing that part of the project?
Right. So the, excuse me, the sort of development parcels that would be potentially created because of the park and the consolidation, most of those would likely be managed by the Delaware River Waterfront Corporation. However, I will say that there are several private development sites along the waterfront that have now come into play, and we've seen some,
on that parcel,
I would say some significant activity down there, and some of those developers have said the reason that they are down there is specifically because of the announcement about the cap.
Can you turn your mic a little in front of you?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. So most of those development parcels that would kind of be created as a result of the actual park development will be controlled by the Delaware River Waterfront Corporation. However, along the waterfront, there are also many privately owned sites.
But can you stick to the
well, I'm just going to say that
park.
We've seen that some of those sites have recently changed hands, and the reason that the developers that are coming into town have said that they bought those sites was specifically because of the development going on with the CAP project.
Okay, and we'll try it again.
Okay.
So we're spending, how much is the park, the capping? 100 and what million?
The city's investment is 90 million. The
Right.
total cost is about 220 to 250.
All right, so we're spending more than $200 million. My question is, what's going to happen is it $200 million for just the park, or are there developments that are either on the cap or?
That's the cost of the cap itself. There will not be private
At all.
development on top of that. The structure
Will there be
not
any
hold that.
connected to the cap, next to the cap?
So the design involves connections points, but there's not design of the stuff that will be connecting. That's going to be private development for the most part.
In the proximity of the private development to the park? I'm just trying to find, when somebody asks me, why are you spending $200 million for a park? And
Right, so
I
there
have
are
a- I have a
there are
parking-
development, there are development sites that are right adjacent. So I don't know if you recall that there used to be the scissor ramps down between Chestnut and Market that kind of came like this.
It's closed now,
That came
right?
like this, and
Right.
those scissor ramps have been taken down. And right now, that's just grass, but that will eventually, when the park is created, that's a development site. And then there are also an area of, and I'm sorry, I don't know the exact location, but there's kind of a marina just to the south of the cap that is also will become a development site.
So we're looking at two developments?
Yeah, so they're actually pretty substantial sites. So both of those sites will probably would be able to hold multiple buildings.
All right, so who from the city is kind of?
So like I said,
$200 million is a lot of money,
No, I
or is
totally
it just me?
understand. Right. But so both of those, like I said, those properties are under the purview of the Delaware River Waterfront Corporation, but any development that would be
Is that
proposed for those sites would have to come through, the normal approval processes
Right,
and all
so
of
I
that.
guess I'm trying to find out who is ultimately responsible for overseeing or monitoring the commercial activity.
So it's
Other than the Delaware River
Delaware River
Waterfront.
Waterfront Corporation, and then
Which is a quasi?
it's a
is it
nonprofit. I don't know 100% about how it was set up. I mean, I honestly, I do sit on the board. It used to be the Penn's Landing Corporation, and then it was
remember that.
reconstituted several years ago. So the board is made up of, there's some city officials that sit on the board, and then there are kind of private individuals that sit on the board as well.
Who from the city is on the board?
I'm on
just
the
trying to, if you can't, it's fine if you can't
No.
respond to the question.
I'm on the board.
So you're on the board? Okay.
I'm on the board.
Well, then you're responsible. All right.
Michael DeBerdinis is on the board.
We're
Yeah.
going around this
All right. Michael DeBerdinis is on the board as the former managing director. I think there's a conversation about whether Brian Abernathy takes that seat. I'm on the board. Harold Epps was on the board, but I can't confirm that he's still on the board. But it's basically me and the managing director's office.
Do you meet frequently?
Yes. We meet, there's a board meeting every quarter, and there's an executive committee meeting, and I sit on the executive committee that meets once a month.
Okay, so would you be in a better position to give us a little more detail about what's going on?
Yeah, sure.
Because I didn't know you were on the board.
No, I can get more
responses were
specifics. I mean, I think the reality is the CAP is going to start construction in 2021. So with those specific development sites,
So
I don't think we're
so is it
going to
that
see.
you don't anticipate the formulation of the market rate or the commercial development until things were actually under construction and people were,
Right.
there's some level of certainty that, okay, now I see this under construction, now I'm going to invest and I'll sign the commitment.
Yeah, like I said, there is a site that's owned by Delaware River Waterfront Corporation that's just to the north of the CAP. That's not sort of one of those specific development sites that now is in play. And there are several piers to the north of Benjamin Franklin Bridge that have been purchased by a private investment entity from another private owner. And the reason that developer said they specifically purchased those piers was because of the CAP investment.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gim.
Thank you very much, Council President. I just had a very quick question for OIT. Are they here? Good afternoon.
Good morning.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Mark Wheeler, Chief Information Officer.
Yeah, welcome. I'm glad that we have a chance to see each other face to face, so glad to have you there.
Thank you,
do you think you can just provide for us, because it was only once provided for us in the past, but a running list of all of OIT's capital projects, the date of inception when they were first approved, the budget that it was initially approved at, accumulated cost, and then projected date of completion and projected cost. So in part what we're looking at is, and I know you're relatively inheriting this position, not inheriting, but you're stepping into this important position. But I think we want to understand a little bit better, because OIT projects, and I understand they're very complicated, you're dealing with major systems and rapidly evolving technology that sometimes, is changing on you even while you're inking a contract with folks. But we want to understand a little bit better how we're tracking projects that are currently outstanding, and then project completion, things that have been completed. And so, we don't really have a good accounting of that. I don't know that, certainly the capital plan doesn't do it. But ahead of your departmental's appearance before the City Council, could you agree to provide for us, if not provide a very quick briefing for some of us maybe, just a full accounting of all the current projects that exist for OIT and what stage they're in?
Yeah, certainly. We do keep that accounting. We do use a project management system. We have project managers, and we do gates around those and have check-ins. So I actually have a spreadsheet with me. I don't have the detail that you're asking for at this point, but we can certainly provide that. And I'm happy to have any briefing before the council hearing that you'd like.
And I think do we have the old form? Did you keep it, Councilman Dunn? Okay. If we have the old form, we'll be able to share it with you, and then maybe you can take a look at it and see if you want to modify it or how, the format, so we better understand what projects and what stage that they're in. That would be very helpful.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Dunn.
President, and good afternoon. I just want to follow up with Councilwoman Gibbs' question. There was a financial accounting system that we were going to implement.
Yes, famous replacement of famous.
Famous.
Yep.
Is it famous today or not so famous?
It's included in our capital program for replacement. We're very excited about it. Replacement of, it's called now the FACTS project, because it's replacing famous as well as our procurement systems, AdPix and ACES.
And will that be the tool that will get us away from using Excel and Lotus?
I'm not, we love our Excel. So I think our goal is to replace the accounting system, which is our mainframe system, and then I think there are probably many other things that can make improvements after we've got that new system in place, including many of our existing processes and systems that we're using.
But at one time, we were with a vendor with that program that I think went bankrupt.
Sorry,
wasn't there a vendor?
Not for replacement of famous, I don't think.
Well, it was one of the systems we were looking at. We had a vendor that went under.
Sorry. Oh, it's for
One Philly.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's not for the replacement of our accounting system. One Philly is a payroll, HR, pensions.
Right. Where does that system stand?
One Philly, it was live yesterday.
Okay.
We're very excited.
So let me ask you the financial question. What was the budgeted amount for One Philly, and what was the final cost amount for One
And I actually think someone can answer that question. I think Catherine Lamb from Finance is going to come up and answer that question.
I guess to follow up on that, I think Councilwoman Gibbs' list should include what we're budgeting, and where we are today in the cost, and what we project the cost to be at the end.
Yes, yeah. We can make sure that's included in that table when we follow up.
Catherine Lamb, First Deputy for the Finance Department. So, Councilman, just to be specific, the project actually went live in December of 2018 in a phased approach. So in December, we launched the benefits portion of it as well as the HR portion of it. Come January, we then launched self-service for employees. Last week, as Anna mentioned, we finally went live with timekeeping, which is the prelude to payroll, which we will cut the first check from the new payroll system next week. So the original budget for the project, if you just give me a moment.
Well, let me ask you a question. Does that include all departments in the city where you don't have to sign the weekly payroll sheets anymore for hours used?
So all city departments now are in OTL for time capture, yes.
Okay, good.
But some departments are still using, there's 3 different methods of time entry. So some departments have still chosen a timekeeper method where people in the field may be still doing paper timesheets, but it is then sent centrally and entered into the system centrally.
So I'm looking for the original estimated cost and then
Yes.
the final cost.
So the original budget was $34.8 million, all funds. So this is capital, operating, as well as the contribution from the pension fund, the water fund, and the aviation fund. And it was for 6 years. We are actually not completed with the project, so we don't have the final actuals. We won't until we go live with pensions. But the projected budget right now is $39.4 million for the same 6-year period.
Is there any projected estimated final cost?
That's the 39.4
39,
million.
that's projected.
Mhm.
And just so I can understand this, if we invested $39.4 million, that's to make the systems better in the city.
Correct.
Is there any other economical payback that will occur from that investment?
The benefits of the project. We anticipate being able to better manage, have the tools to help us better manage overtime with the new system. Part of the challenges with overtime is being able to quickly understand what the drivers of it. And that is a component of that is a legacy mainframe application with the poor reporting abilities. Not poor, but limited reporting abilities. I don't want to denigrate the system too much. There's still people supporting it. So their increased reporting features we do hope and anticipate to help us better manage overtime.
So I don't want to put you on the spot now, but going back to Councilwoman Gibbs' requirement for the list, can we add a category in there as to the financial payback of the implementation of those projects and what the savings are and what the payback in number of years are as an additional column?
Yeah, we can work on that.
Because what I'm looking for is if we invested $39.4 million, this example, is there any economic benefit to the city in investing that money other than we made our systems better? If we made our systems better, does that mean that we saved on labor? I mean, what are the savings that we accrued from that investment?
And I think we can look at that in a number of ways, and we'll do our best to tackle it. It's always going to be hard. Sometimes some of the existing systems aren't well supported right now, and so the nature of kind of the cost component is harder to quantify. But we'll do our best to come up with what we think is a good return on investment calculation for you, and include that in the table.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President, and my apologies for being late. Yeah, kind of was. And my apologies to all of you as well. A couple of quick questions, and if they've been answered already, charge it to my lateness. A couple of budgets back, we had a graphic illustration of the time it takes to complete capital projects and as a result, the backlog of capital projects. Have we made progress?
We have, and actually you can see that in the reduction in the amount of carry forward that we show in the new program. So we can see that we're spending down the existing resources before we're making those, adding the new budget amount, and you can see that paying off throughout the city departments. You can really see the change in the carry forwards.
So can you quantify that from?
Yeah, we have that. We can send that to you. We have a table showing the prior carry forward numbers and the progress that we've made on spending that down. And I think that really shows the work that the departments, especially in public property, have been doing to get these projects underway, complete them, and push forward on the new projects.
So
I second what Anna said.
I want to particularly cite the great work that has been done in the Recreation Department to almost patch together some of our rec centers in a way. But if I were to make one observation in light of all of the new rebuild efforts, that if you had one single silver bullet that you could move these projects along is to give Frank Faby, no, I'm not laughing though, give Frank Faby his workforce. He damn near climbs up on ladders himself to fix roofs and things like that, and we really want to, and I don't need you to come up, Catherine, I'm asking them, to empower the rec department to make those hires.
Yep.
We're, not that politics matters, but we happen to be in re-elect, is that right, Mr. President?
He told me that.
Yeah, somebody told you it was a re-election year.
Yeah.
And so if we could get more indications of people doing the routine repairs,
Yes.
the fixing of restrooms, the fixing of roofs and things like that, then there would be a renewed faith that our government can actually do rebuild. And so where are we at specifically?
On the hiring of those positions?
Yeah.
And this was, and I know during when we were talking about the beverage tax and rebuild in budget a couple of years ago, and that's why I know that the council president recommended the adding of the positions, those 40 positions, supported thanks to the money from the beverage tax in the Department of Parks and Recreation. And now that the litigation has been resolved, the department is now hiring in those positions that are really important. And so you'll see some real improvement because we've been able to start hiring in those positions.
So while the commissioner comes up, I also want to thank the streets department and particularly lighting. We've been besieged by the state to remove stop lights in some of our commercial corridors, and I want to thank you for giving priority to making sure pedestrian safety was concerned. That goes, it's not the legislation that we pass, it's those quality of life infrastructure things that they see that matter so much. Commissioner?
Yeah, thank you. Catherine Outlevel, Commissioner, Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. So we are working very hard to hire those positions. We did receive an extra allocation of skilled trades positions, and we're working to build a capital squad that would be dedicated to special capital projects that can really help to reduce time and cost to get capital projects done. We do struggle, to be completely honest, because it's a very attractive climate right now for people in skilled trades, and you do have other entities that can pay more than we pay. To be completely honest, SEPTA is advertising all the time for skilled trades positions, and the pay is better at some other places. So we do struggle, with some of the recruitment efforts. That said, we've been really impressed with the quality of the candidates that are coming through. Frank and our team just participated in, for instance, the cement finishers and the roofers examinations, and we're really impressed with the quality of candidates coming through. So we're hiring at a clip, but we still struggle with being able to recruit and retain candidates given unfortunately the competitive environment for skilled trades positions in the city right now.
So one of the recommendations I would have is a school to paycheck pipeline, working with our CTE schools to, like with Fleet, I understand Fleet has 1/3 of their workforce now comes from public schools, which I think is laudable and would encourage us doing that. So thank you on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
One other question that I would have is, one of the things that has, and the president took us all the way up to New York on a field trip to look at traffic resolutions. And in so doing, one of the things, and it's not just a Center City thing, it is a East Falls, Roxborough, Manayunk thing. It is a Overbrook Farms thing. And I want to know, A, how we're approaching that. One issue I have is a third bridge, which I won't see in my lifetime maybe, but over to Schuylkill that may, for future Philadelphians, be a resolution to the nightmare of traffic in that part of my district. But also, how are we working with our partners in the counties to come up with these long-term and short-term solutions by way of traffic?
Well, just to address your first set of comments.
State your name.
I'm sorry, Mike Carroll, again, Deputy Managing Director, Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability. It's early days, so we're grateful you guys did the work, and police department was able to attend that field trip and bring back some good insights about how that works. It's likely that we will model it similarly to that. I think we need to get good input from police department in terms of how they see that management taking place, how they work with the rest of the city in terms of finding the right type of title, right type of qualifications, what duties are assigned. So that work remains ahead of us, and we'll be putting together a plan and working with folks in council to really identify the best impact that we can have. In addition to that, like you say, though, we have to continue doing the work in front of us, working with our partners at PennDOT and the counties, other municipalities at the same time. Fortunately, all of the counties are part of the same PennDOT district. And so that makes it convenient because we sort of have a one-stop shop to talk to the folks across the city line at PennDOT District 6 to identify opportunities to improve the way signals work, to figure out whether we can do more to integrate our signal system with the signal systems that exist in Lower Marion or, up and down City Line Avenue as you cross. And so we want to make sure in those conversations we're representing the interests of the city of Philadelphia, the residents of the city of Philadelphia. It's important for people to get to work and come into the city and contribute to our economy, but when they do so, they need to understand that they're crossing into Philadelphia neighborhoods and they're impacting the ability for kids to cross the street to get to school or people waiting for the bus and so forth. So there's a lot of dialogue that's going on right now. PennDOT is pushing forward a couple initiatives in terms of what they want to do to streamline the way that traffic enters the city, not just on the city streets, but the Schuylkill Expressway, and then parallel routes to Schuylkill Expressway. So we're working towards coming to some agreements around that type of thing, but we don't have to necessarily wait on them. I think we also have an opportunity within the city to do more to improve traffic safety, to improve traffic flow, and so we're looking at how technology and data can be a bigger part of that story, and that's something I'm very focused on with the rest of the team.
So when we went to New York, we saw almost a Star Wars type map of traffic, and it was similar to what you might see at the Dybbuk.
Yeah.
Do you see that in our?
Yeah, so we have stood up a traffic operations center. And so the next task for us is to make sure that the information flows to that center reliably so we have a real-time sense of what's going on minute by minute. And also we need to extend our ability to actually manage traffic from that center, working with police, also streets department, our partners at PPA and SEPTA, and create that integration that gives you that kind of 21st century Star Wars-like control as much as possible. And it's a long game because you got to start with the basics. You need the signals all tied back to that center, and that's a work in progress. We do what we can to increase the extent of our communications network. It's very challenging to maintain that, and we're looking at all types of solutions so that it's a lower maintenance, lower cost. Fortunately, the good news is that kind of technology is really starting to become available in ways that it wasn't even 5 years ago. And so our opportunities to work with different types of things like 5G technology, we're very interested in that. Working with folks who are in the telecommunications industry, the Googles, the IBMs, and so forth. We want to organize that process according to our Smart Cities roadmap, but it's very clear that there are opportunities, and we just want to put ourselves in the best light to take advantage of that.
Just final question I have, Mr. President, and thank you for taking us. That was enlightening ways to innovatively deal with some of our growth concerns, whether it's in Center City, South Philly, North Philly, or in my case, West Philly, and East Falls, Roxborough, Manio. This is for the fire department. capital. I've been up to the Burn building on a number of occasions, and it is antiquated in the sense that it needs to be replaced. Is there someone who can speak to that?
So I know, public property is here, but obviously the fire department aren't here today because of the funeral for the firefighter, but public property here can answer some of the questions.
So actually, the Burn building is being replaced. So
You can stop.
that's the answer. All right, I'll stop.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Broke a record with that one. Yes, that was quick. Thank you. There doesn't appear to be any additional questions by members of the committee, so there being none, this committee will stand in recess until Wednesday, March 27, 10 a.m., at which time we will reconvene in room 400, City Hall. Thank you all very much.
I know, it's a good question to end on. Oh my God.